Chicago. A late autumn afternoon. The sky overcast with bitter winds cutting through the bustling streets. Ethan Caldwell, a 32-year-old white American man and CEO of the luxury hotel chain Caldwell Resorts, drove his black Mercedes through the city center. With neatly combed brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a perfectly tailored suit, Ethan looked like someone who belonged to skyscrapers and lavish parties. But today, his mind wasn't there. A tense meeting with the board had just ended, and his father, Robert Caldwell, had once again reminded him of his duty to inherit the family empire. Ethan felt suffocated, as if his life were a sequence of prearranged expectations. In a moment of distraction, Ethan turned down a narrow, deserted street in South Chicago. The old buildings with peeling walls and a few rusted cars scattered along the curb made him realize he was lost. He stopped the car, intending to open the map app on his phone. But before he could do anything, a group of 3 young men appeared from the corner. They wore hoodies, faces hidden under their hoods, and their eyes held no warmth. Out of the car, one of them said, holding a folding knife. Ethan, though calm, knew he had no chance to resist. He stepped out of the car and raised his hands, his heart pounding. Within minutes, the Mercedes was gone, along with his wallet, phone, and the expensive watch on his wrist. Standing alone on the sidewalk, Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. No wallet, no phone, no way to call a cab or a private ride. He looked around. The street was still silent, not a soul in sight. In the distance, a faint light glimmered from the main avenue, and Ethan decided to walk. Walking wasn't a habit for him. He hadn't done it since college. But now he had no other choice, in a wrinkled suit and glossy leather shoes stained with dust. After 10 minutes, he reached an old bus stop where a few people were waiting. A faded sign indicated the route would pass through downtown near the Caldwell Tower where he lived. Ethan exhaled in relief. The bus, a mode of transport he hadn't used since high school, was now his only hope. At the same time, Amara Jenkins, a 27-year-old black American woman, stood at the bus stop clutching her thin jacket against the cold. Amara radiated strength and gentleness, with her curly hair tied high and warm brown eyes. She had just finished an 8-hour shift at Bean & Brew, the cafe where she worked as a barista and server. It had been a hectic day, full of demanding customers and non-stop orders that drained her. Amara had only a few coins left in her bag, just enough to pay for the bus ride home to a small apartment in Inglewood she shared with her mother, Grace. Most of her wages went toward bills and supporting her mom, who worked at a laundromat. Amara's dream of opening her bakery where she could bake sweet treats filled with childhood memories still felt like a distant hope. The bus arrived, a rattling old vehicle with peeling paint. Amara stepped on board, counting each coin in her hand and handing them to the driver, a gruff-looking middle-aged man. She found a seat near the window, sank into it, and closed her eyes, trying to push away her exhaustion. But a loud exchange near the door made her open them. "No money, no ride, buddy," the driver snapped. Amara looked up front and saw a man, Ethan, standing on the steps, looking confused, but trying to stay composed. His suit was wrinkled, his hair slightly tousled, but something striking about him was that he didn't belong in this place. "I was robbed," Ethan said, his voice deep but clear. "They took my wallet, phone, everything. I need to get downtown. Please." The driver crossed his arms, shaking his head. "Everyone's got a story. No money, no ride. That's the rule." Ethan clenched his fists, trying to hold back his frustration. He had never felt this helpless. In his world, problems were solved with a phone call or a credit card. But now, he had nothing but his words. Amara watched from her seat. There was something in Ethan's voice, a mix of sincerity and desperation that wouldn't let her stay still. She stood, walked to the front and reached into her pocket for the last coins. She said, "I'll pay for him," her voice soft but firm. The bus fell silent. Ethan turned his blue eyes wide with surprise. He looked at Amara, a woman with a gentle smile and eyes full of quiet resolve. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "I already did," Amara replied, handing the money to the driver. "Get on before he changes his mind." The driver muttered something but accepted the money and waved Ethan aboard. Ethan stepped in and found a seat a few rows away from Amara. As the bus pulled away, he glanced at her sitting by the window streetlights, casting a pale glow on her face. She didn't look at him, just quietly stared outside as if what she'd done was no big deal. But to Ethan, it was a shock. He came from a world where everything had a price, where kindness usually came with a motive. But this woman, whose name he didn't even know, had helped him without asking for anything. Amara, meanwhile, didn't think much of her action. She grew up in a neighborhood where people helped each other even in small ways. Her mother Grace always said kindness was the only thing that never lost value, no matter how hard life became. But when she glanced over her shoulder and saw Ethan still looking at her, she felt curious. Who was he? Why would someone dressed like that end up in this situation? She quickly brushed the thought aside. She had to get home, prepare for her evening business management class, and save every cent to turn her bakery dream into reality. When the bus stopped near downtown, Ethan stood up. He hesitated, wanting to thank you, but Amara had already risen and walked to the door ahead of him. "Thank you," he called out as she stepped off. Amara turned back, offering a small smile. "Everyone needs help. Sometimes," she said, then walked away, her slender frame disappearing into the streetlights. Ethan stood there watching her go, a strange feeling rising in his chest. He didn't know her name, but knew he wouldn't forget her. As the bus moved again, Ethan looked out the window, his thoughts still circling the moment just past. He, one of the wealthiest men in Chicago, had just been saved by a stranger using her last few coins. It left him feeling both humbled and deeply moved. He touched the inside pocket of his suit. There was nothing there but a cheap ballpoint pen. "I have to find her," he muttered, though he had no idea where to start. But one thing was sure, this encounter had changed something in him, even if it was just a small spark in his otherwise cold world. The next morning, the pale autumn sunlight filtered through the window of Amara Jenkins' small apartment in Englewood, Chicago. Though cramped, the apartment was always warm with the scent of cookies her mother Grace baked on weekends. Amara sat on an old armchair holding a cup of cold coffee, her eyes heavy with fatigue. She had barely slept the night before, her mind spinning between her business management assignments and the image of the stranger on the bus. She didn't understand why she kept thinking about him, a man whose name she didn't even know, whom she had helped purely by chance. Must be exhaustion, she told herself, getting up to prepare for her shift at Bean and Brew. Amara had grown up in this struggling neighborhood, where bills and long working days often choked dreams. Her father, Leroy, passed away when she was just 10, leaving Grace to raise their daughter alone. On nights when rent loomed and money ran tight, Amara and her mother would bake simple butter cookies or chocolate chip treats Grace had learned from Amara's grandmother. "Sweet things ease the pain," baby Grace would say, her smile tinged with sorrow. It was in those moments that Amara's dream took root to open her bakery, a place where she could bring joy to others, just as her mother had done for her. But that dream, no matter how fiercely it burned, was always restrained by reality. Tuition, living costs, and the small savings she scraped together from her service job. A few miles away, Ethan Caldwell awoke on a leather sofa in a luxurious penthouse at Caldwell Tower, still wearing the wrinkled suit from the night before. After returning home, He had sat for hours staring at the Chicago skyline, unable to stop thinking about the girl from the bus. Ethan had grown up wealthy, the only son of Robert Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Resorts, a hotel empire spanning the United States. From a young age, Ethan was taught everything has a price: friendship, loyalty, and even love. His father, a stern man with silver hair and piercing eyes, always emphasized that Caldwells never bow. Yet Ethan, despite his success as CEO, often felt like his life was a gilded cage. He hadn't chosen his school or friends, and now, at 32, he was under pressure to marry a woman of equal standing to reinforce the family's position. Last night, returning to his apartment, Ethan looked into the mirror and asked himself, "Who am I?" He had everything: money, power, fame, but was missing something he couldn't define. Through a simple act of kindness, the girl on the bus had made him feel something different, a flicker of warmth in his otherwise cold world. He decided he had to find her. Relying on the memory of her green apron, Ethan guessed she worked at a cafe near the bus stop. He called his assistant, instructing her to locate all coffee shops where staff wore green uniforms. "And make it fast," he said, voice filled with resolve. At Bean & Brew, Amara was wiping down the counter soft jazz, playing from an old speaker. The small cafe with red brick walls and rustic wooden tables was always busy in the mornings. Amara, with a friendly smile, served coffee and chatted with regulars. But today, she felt a strange restlessness, as if something were about to happen. Tasha, her coworker, a lively girl with long braided hair, noticed her unease. "What's up with you, Amara? You look like you're waiting for someone," Tasha teased, holding a tray of muffins. Amara gave a half smile, shaking her head. "Just tired, that's all." Just then the doorbell jingled and Ethan stepped in. He had changed into a white shirt and simple slacks, but he still had an unmistakable air of elegance. Amara glanced up in the middle of making a coffee and instantly recognized him. Those blue eyes, though calmer now, were unmistakable. Ethan looked around until his gaze landed on Amara. He smiled softly and walked to the counter, sitting on a high stool. "Hi," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I owe you a thank you." Amara froze for a second, regained her composure, and wiped her hands on her apron. "You don't owe me anything," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. It was just the right thing to do. Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if trying to read her thoughts. Not many people would have done that, especially for a stranger. "What's your name?" Amara hesitated. She wasn't used to sharing with people like him, people who looked like they belonged to a different world, but his sincerity softened her guard. "Amara," she said, turned to make his coffee, trying to hide her unease. "Amara," Ethan repeated, as if committing the name to memory. "I'm Ethan, and I'd like to repay you for yesterday." He pulled out his wallet, a new one since the old had been stolen, and took out a few bills. Amara shook her head and placed a cup of coffee before him. "I don't take money. If you want to repay me, drink this. It's good." Ethan chuckled, a rare laugh that softened his usually stern face. "All right, but fair warning, I'm picky about coffee." Tasha nearby watched the exchange with wide eyes. When Amara returned to the kitchen, Tasha whispered, "Who is that guy? He looks like he just stepped out of a Hollywood movie." Amara shrugged, trying to act indifferent, "Just someone from the bus." But inside, she couldn't deny her curiosity. Ethan wasn't like the usual customers. He spoke politely, but without arrogance. How he looked at her as if he genuinely wanted to understand her made her feel comfortable and cautious. Ethan sipped the coffee. The rich taste and gentle aroma made him nod in approval. He looked at Amara, now busy with other customers, and realized she wasn't just kind. She had a quiet magnetism. She worked with focus, her smile constant, despite the fatigue in her eyes. Ethan wondered what she had gone through to carry herself with such strength. He wanted to ask to learn more, but he also knew he had to be careful. If she found out who he was, Ethan Caldwell, heir to Caldwell Resorts, would she still treat him like a regular person? As Ethan stood to leave, he slipped a $20 bill under the coffee cup, far more than the cost of the drink. Amara noticed the bill and shook her head in exasperation, but she smiled anyway. "Stubborn man," she muttered. Tasha, standing beside her, laughed aloud. "Watch out, Amara. He seems to like you." Amara brushed it off, but she felt an irresistible curiosity when she looked toward the door where Ethan had exited. Would he come back? And if he did, should she let him into her world? Meanwhile, Ethan stepped onto the street, sunlight warming his face. He knew he'd return to Bean and Brew, not just to repay a favor, but because Amara had awakened something in him he'd been missing for a long time, a genuine connection. But he also knew that to get closer, he would have to hide parts of himself until he could be sure she wouldn't see him only through the lens of wealth and status. A week had passed since that fateful encounter on the bus, and Bean and Brew Cafe in Chicago had become a regular stop for Ethan Caldwell. He arrived at precisely 8 a.m. every morning, just as the early sunlight streamed through the cafe's windows, casting a golden glow on the red brick walls. Dressed in a simple white shirt and slacks, Ethan tried to blend into the rustic atmosphere, but his natural elegance still made him stand out among the regular patrons, from truck drivers to office workers. He always took the high stool at the counter, ordered a black coffee, and waited for a chance to talk to Amara Jenkins. Amara, with her curly hair tied high and her warm smile, had come to recognize Ethan's presence as part of her routine. She wouldn't admit it, but every morning the bell above the door jingled. She instinctively glanced up, searching for his blue eyes. Today the cafe was busier than usual, filled with the sounds of coffee machines and lively conversations. Amara moved quickly, taking orders and serving drinks. But when Ethan walked in, she still took a moment to greet him. "Black coffee again?" she asked, already holding a cup in her hand. Ethan smiled, resting his elbow on the counter. "Do you remember my order?" "I'm honored." Amara shot him a playful glare, but the corners of her lips lifted. "Don't flatter yourself. I remember all my regulars' orders." She turned to prepare his drink, but inside she felt a strange ease. Ethan wasn't like other customers. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't demanding. And the way he looked at her, as if he genuinely wanted to understand her, made her both curious and cautious. Ethan sipped his coffee. The familiar rich flavor made him nod with satisfaction. He watched Amara as she worked, how she chatted with an older woman about the weather, how she gracefully deflected a flirty comment from a male customer, and how she always smiled even when her eyes betrayed exhaustion. He wondered what she had gone through to possess such resilience. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, as Amara returned to the counter to wipe away a coffee spill. 2 years, she replied without looking up. "And you? What do you do that gives you so much free time every morning?" Ethan chuckled, already prepared with a vague answer. "I work in hospitality. The schedule is flexible, so I have time for coffee." He wasn't lying, but wasn't revealing that he was Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Resorts. He feared that if Amara knew, she'd see him differently, just like everyone else. Amara nodded, but her eyes briefly scanned him as if trying to read something. "Hospitality, huh? Sounds fancy. But you don't look like someone who works behind a desk." Ethan raised his cup to mask his discomfort. "Then what do I look like?" Amara shrugged her smile, teasing. "I don't know. Maybe the type who gets into trouble like that day on the bus." They both laughed, and the distance between them seemed to shrink in that short moment. Tasha, Amara's co-worker, came out from the kitchen, holding a tray of freshly baked scones. With long braided hair and a lively spirit, Tasha was always the energy spark in the cafe. She glanced at Ethan, then leaned in to whisper to Amara near the espresso machine. "Mr. Fancy Suit is back. Did you see how he looks at you? It's like he's totally into you." Amara rolled her eyes and warned, "Don't start. He's just a customer." But Tasha wasn't backing down. She winked. "A customer who comes in daily and only orders one black coffee, girl. He's got a motive." Tasha's teasing unsettled Amara. She looked at Ethan across the room, scrolling on his phone, and wondered if Tasha was right. Ethan wasn't like the men she knew in Englewood. He spoke with Polish, but wasn't arrogant, and his presence felt both foreign and oddly comforting. But she reminded herself she didn't have time for romance. Between work school and her dream of owning a bakery, Amara had learned to set her priorities straight. "I don't care," she told Tasha firmly, though her heart wasn't as certain as her voice. Ethan, though unaware of their conversation, noticed Amara looking his way. He decided to keep the conversation going. "Hey, Amara," he called as she returned with more sugar packets. "Besides making excellent coffee, what else do you do, I mean, when you're not here?" Amara was surprised by the question. Customers rarely showed interest in her life. She hesitated, then answered, "I study business management. At night. And I like to bake." Her eyes lit up as she said it, and Ethan could see that she truly loved baking. "Bake," he echoed, intrigued. "What kind of things?" Amara smiled for the first time, showing genuine excitement. "Butter cookies, chocolate chip, lemon cake, anything that makes people happy. I want to open a bakery one day." She stopped as if realizing she'd said too much. Ethan leaned in, eyes never leaving hers. "A bakery? That sounds amazing. Do you have a plan?" Amara shrugged, her voice tinged with self-deprecation. "I have a plan, but not the money. Big dreams cost a lot, you know." Ethan nodded, but inside, a thought sparked. He wanted to help not with money, because he knew she would reject it, but in some way that could bring her closer to her dream. Still, he knew he had to tread carefully. He didn't want Amara to think he was trying to buy her attention. "I believe you'll make it happen," he said sincerely. Amara looked at him surprised. "Why are you so sure? You've only met me a few times." Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. "Because I see how you work. Someone with that drive doesn't give up easily." Ethan's words left Amara speechless. She wasn't used to people believing in her, especially not strangers like him. She turned away, pretending to busy herself with the coffee machine, but her heart beat faster. Tasha, who had overheard the conversation, pulled Amara aside after Ethan left a $10 bill beneath his cup. "Told you, he's not just some regular guy. Did you hear what he said? That was straight out of a movie." Amara frowned, trying to dismiss it. "You watch too many romantic comedies. He's just being polite." But Tasha's words planted a seed of doubt. Who was Ethan? And why did he care so much about her? Ethan stepped outside, feeling both relieved and anxious. He knew he was getting drawn to Amara, not just because of her kindness, but her honesty and passion. But he also knew that getting closer meant keeping his true identity a secret. If Amara found out he was the heir to Caldwell Resorts, would she still talk to him like a friend? He didn't want to take that risk. Just a little longer, he told himself, stepping into the waiting car. But deep down, he knew the secrecy couldn't last forever. It had been 2 weeks since Ethan Caldwell first stepped into Bean & Brew, and Amara Jenkins's routine had subtly shifted, though she wouldn't admit it. Every morning, the jingle of the cafe door at 8 a.m. signaled Ethan's arrival, bringing his gentle smile and familiar greeting. Amara began to look forward to their brief conversations about coffee, the weather, or random stories about Chicago. But she also sensed an invisible boundary between them, something Ethan wasn't telling her. He was always vague when she asked about his work or life, And though she tried to ignore it, the seed of doubt Tasha had planted continued to grow quietly. That Friday afternoon, the cafe was packed with office workers seeking a caffeine fix to push through the weekend. Amara moved swiftly between the counter and tables in her familiar green apron, hands busy brewing and serving. Ethan, as usual, sat at the counter, but today he seemed more contemplative. He had just received an email from his father, Robert Caldwell, requesting that he attend a charity gala at the Caldwell Grand Hotel that evening. "You need to show up, Ethan. Don't let people think the Caldwells are faltering," the email read. Ethan sighed, sipped his coffee, and tried to push aside the pressure. While carrying out a tray of scones, Tasha noticed the change in Ethan's demeanor. She whispered to Amara as they stood behind the counter, "Your guy looks like he just fought with his boss." Or maybe his girlfriend Amara shot her a warning glare. "He's not my guy. And stop making up stories." Tasha shrugged, grinning playfully. "I'm just calling it like I see it. He looks at you like you're his whole world." Amara shook her head, but couldn't deny that Tasha's words left her unsettled. She glanced at Ethan, who was scrolling on his phone, and wondered again, who was he? As the crowd began to thin, Amara brought out a plate of freshly baked scones and placed it in front of Ethan. "Try one. Fresh from the oven," she said softly. Ethan looked up and smiled. "Did you bake these yourself?" Amara nodded, her eyes gleaming with pride. "My mom's recipe. If I ever open a bakery, that'll be my signature item." Ethan took a bite, the rich buttery flavor melting on his tongue. "It's incredible," he said sincerely. "You need to open that bakery. Chicago needs a place like that." Amara smiled, but her eyes held a trace of sadness. "Thanks, but dreams are easy. It's the doing that's hard." Ethan wanted to say something to offer his help, but stopped himself. He knew Amara wouldn't accept help if it came in money, especially when she didn't know who he was. Their conversation was interrupted when another customer called Amara and Ethan decided to leave. As usual, he left a tip double the price of his coffee and walked out into the street feeling a heavy weight in his chest. He knew he couldn't hide his identity forever, but he feared losing their natural connection whenever he thought about telling her. That evening, Amara stayed late to help clean the cafe while Tasha turned on the small wall-mounted TV to catch the news. A report on the charity gala at the Caldwell Grand Hotel caught their attention. "Look at that rich people gathering again," Tasha said sarcastically. Amara glanced up at the screen, and her heart stopped. On the TV, Ethan, wearing a sleek black tuxedo, was stepping into the hotel surrounded by reporters and camera flashes. The news anchor announced Ethan Caldwell, heir to the Caldwell Resorts hotel chain, donated $1 million to the Children's Education Fund. He is expected to take over his father Robert Caldwell's empire shortly. Amara stood frozen, the cleaning cloth slipping from her hand onto the counter. Tasha, noticing the change in her expression, turned. "What's wrong, Amara? Do you know him?" Amara didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the screen. Ethan, the man she believed to be a regular hotel worker, was in fact a millionaire. Someone from a world she only saw on television. She felt as if she'd been deceived, as if their conversations and shared smiles were nothing more than part of a game he was playing. "Amara, are you okay?" Tasha asked, her voice full of concern. Amara shook her head, trying to stay calm. I need some air." She removed her apron and stepped outside, breathing in the cold Chicago night. In her mind, pieces started falling into place. The way Ethan spoke, his wardrobe, the oversized tips. She blamed herself for not realizing it sooner. "How stupid am I?" she muttered, hurt and anger swelling inside her. He had kept the truth from her, but why? What did he want from a girl like her? The next morning, Ethan returned to Bean and Brew, unaware that everything had changed. He walked in with his usual smile, but Amara standing behind the counter didn't return it. She placed a coffee cup in front of him, her voice cold. Black coffee, like usual. Ethan frowned, sensing the shift in her tone. Amara, is something wrong? She crossed her arms, eyes sharp. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Ethan. Caldwell. Ethan froze instantly, realizing what had happened. Amara, let me explain. He began, but she cut him off. Explain what? That you're a millionaire, pretending to be a regular guy. That you came here talk to me for what? For fun. Her voice trembled, not with rage, but with pain. Tasha nearby silently watched, not interfering. It's not like that, Ethan said, earnestly. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to see me as a person, not a name, not a pile of money. Amara, everything I said to you and every moment we shared was real. Amara shook her head, her eyes full of disappointment. Real. How can I believe that when you hide who you are, you belong to a world of luxury hotels and million-dollar galas? And me, I'm just a girl working in a cafe. We're not from the same world, Ethan. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He wanted to tell her he didn't care about his world, that she was the only one who made him feel alive. But Amara didn't give him the chance. I need you to leave, she said firmly. Don't come back. Ethan stood there wanting to protest, but her unwavering gaze told him there was no changing her mind. He nodded slowly and left the cafe, feeling like he had lost something precious. Amara returned to work, but her hands trembled as she wiped down the counter. Tasha walked over and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You okay? Amara forced a smile. I will be. But inside, she felt hollow. She had started to trust Ethan had let him into her world, only to discover he hadn't been honest. She wondered if she had been too naive, or if there was something more to Ethan that she didn't yet understand. Saturday evening in Chicago brought the crisp chill of autumn. Cold winds swept through the Englewood neighborhood, stirring golden leaves as they fell gently to the ground. Amara Jenkins sat in a worn-out armchair in the living room of her small apartment, the soft yellow glow of a table lamp casting light across her face, revealing the sadness in her eyes. In front of her sat a cup of chamomile tea, freshly made by her mother Grace. The steam mingled with the faint aroma of cookies drifting in from the kitchen. Since the confrontation with Ethan Caldwell at Bean and Brew, the day before, Amara felt emotionally tangled, angry and hurt, and burdened with a hint of regret she didn't want to admit. Grace, a black woman with salt and pepper hair and a gentle smile, sat across from her daughter, hands clasped together, as if trying to understand what Amara wasn't saying. Are you all right, Amara? She asked in her warm, soothing voice. Amara sighed, setting her tea down. I don't know, Mom. I thought I understood him, but I didn't know him at all. She recounted everything from meeting Ethan on the bus, to his daily visits at the cafe, to seeing him on TV in a tuxedo, revealed as a millionaire from a world light years away from hers. Grace listened quietly, not interrupting. Amara offered a soft smile when she finished, her gaze wise with experience. Do you remember your father? She asked. He was often dismissed because of his poor background and skin, but he always said, don't let the world define someone. Look at their heart. Amara bit her lip, remembering her father, a cheerful man who always told jokes to make her laugh, even when life was harsh. But Ethan lied to me, Mom. How can I trust him? Grace leaned forward, placing a hand gently over her daughter's. Maybe he was scared, Amara. Frightened you'd see him differently. Did you give him a chance to explain? Her mother's words silenced Amara. She had never considered that. She'd been too angry, too hurt to listen. But deep down, she missed the moments he sat at the counter, the sincerity in his eyes when he spoke about her bakery dream. Had she been too quick to shut him out? She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. "I don't want to get hurt again, Mom. I've learned that lesson." Grace nodded, not pushing. "Only you know what's best for you. But don't let fear stop you from learning the truth." A few miles away, Ethan sat alone on the sofa in the luxurious Caldwell Tower penthouse. The glow from the Chicago skyline spilled through the windows, but couldn't chase away the darkness in his chest. In front of him was a glass of whiskey untouched. The image of Amara, her disappointed eyes, her firm voice asking him to leave, haunted him. He had never felt this powerless, not even during million-dollar negotiations or pressure-filled moments with his father, Robert Caldwell. Ethan had grown up in a world where everything could be bought, but not Amara. She didn't care about his money or status, which drew him to her. She was the first to see him as a human being, not a name or a bank account. And now he had shattered that by lacking the courage to tell her the truth. He stood up and walked to the window, looking at the twinkling lights below. "I messed up," he whispered, clenching his fists. That morning, Ethan received a call from his father. "What are you doing wasting time?" "Ethan," Robert barked over the phone, "the board is asking questions. You need to focus, or I'll find someone else to replace you." Ethan inhaled deeply, his voice calm but resolute. "Dad, I need time to think. I don't want to keep living like this." Robert scoffed. "Don't be foolish, Ethan. You were born to run Caldwell Resorts. Please don't throw it all away for some crazy idea." The call ended, but his father's words strengthened Ethan's resolve. He realized that his life, the galas, the endless meetings, had no meaning. Amara, in just a few short weeks, had shown him something different. A world where kindness and passion mattered more than money. He wanted to go back to Bean and Brew to explain, but he knew Amara wouldn't forgive him easily. He needed to do something bigger, something that would prove he wasn't just another rich man toying with her heart. Ethan opened his laptop and began researching the coastal town of Havenport, a place he had visited as a child. It was peaceful, with soft waves and tree-lined streets. An idea sparked. To open a small hotel, not to compete with his father's empire, but to build something meaningful. A place where he could start over. And in that vision, Amara was part of it, with her bakery bringing warmth and sweetness to everyone. But first, he had to confront his father. Ethan knew if he walked away from Caldwell Resorts, Robert Caldwell would not let it go easily. He had to prepare for a fight, not just with his family, but with himself. He picked up his phone, ready to text Amara, but his fingers stopped on the screen. He murmured regret welling inside him. "She won't want to hear from me." Still, he wasn't giving up. He would find a way to prove his feelings for her. Meanwhile, back in the Englewood apartment, Amara lay on her bed, moonlight filtering through the curtains and casting soft shadows on the ceiling. She thought about her mother's words about giving Ethan a chance. But she also remembered past disappointments, friends who left dreams crushed by reality. She didn't want to let her heart be broken again. And yet, as she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan sitting at the counter, smiling as he complimented her cookies. Was I too harsh? She wondered, her chest tightening with doubt. The next morning, Amara arrived at Bean and Brew, feeling weary. Tasha noticed the change immediately. "You're still thinking about the Millionaire, aren't you?" she asked, holding a tray of pastries. Amara sighed, not answering. Tasha set the tray down and looked her straight in the eye. "I don't know who he is, but I saw how he looked at you. You should give him a chance to explain before you decide." Amara nodded slowly, but inside she was still in turmoil. She didn't know if she had the strength to face Ethan again, or if he truly deserved her trust. Monday morning in Chicago carried the damp air left by overnight rain. The streets glistened under the pale sunlight. Behind the counter at Bean and Brew, Amara Jenkins moved swiftly preparing drinks, but her thoughts were tangled. 3 days had passed since she asked Ethan Caldwell to leave, and the cafe now felt missing something. She kept telling herself she had made the right decision, that someone like Ethan with his world of money and status didn't belong in her life. But her mother Grace's advice and Ethan's sincere gaze haunted her, making her wonder if she had been too hasty. Ethan sat in his expansive office at Caldwell Tower, staring out the city through the glass window. On the desk before him was a resignation letter he had written the night before, a bold decision he knew would send shockwaves through his family. After the tense phone call with his father, Robert Caldwell, Ethan realized he could no longer live under the expectations of others. Despite being in his life for only a few weeks, Amara had shown him a different path, a life where he could define himself. He wanted to prove he wasn't the arrogant millionaire she thought he was, and he knew the only way to do that was through action. Ethan picked up the letter, and walked into the boardroom where Robert met with the board of directors. The room went quiet as Ethan placed the letter on the table. "I want to resign," he said firmly. With silver hair and sharp eyes, Robert stared at his son as if he had gone mad. "You're joking, right?" he asked in a low voice. Ethan shook his head. "I'm serious. I don't want to run Caldwell Resorts. I want to do something of my own." The board murmured, but Robert raised his hand to silence them. "This is about a girl," he asked with disdain. Ethan clenched his fists, but stayed composed. "It's not just about her. It's about wanting to live my life honestly." The argument dragged on for hours. Robert warned Ethan of the consequences losing his inheritance and place in high society. But Ethan didn't waver. When he finally left the boardroom, he felt lighter, like he had shed a burden crushing him for years. He knew the next step was finding Amara, not just to apologize, but to share his new dream, a small hotel in the coastal town of Havenport, where he could start again. And he wanted Amara to be part of it. That afternoon, Ethan stepped into Bean and Brew, his heart racing. The cafe was quiet, with only a few customers seated by the windows. Amara, wiping down the counter, looked up at the sound of the bell. When she saw Ethan, she froze, her expression a mix of surprise and guardedness. "I thought I made myself clear," she said coldly. Ethan raised his hand, signaling that he came in peace. "Amara, please. Just 5 minutes." Tasha, standing nearby, glanced at Amara, as if to ask if she should intervene, but Amara gave her a subtle nod to retreat to the kitchen. Ethan took a seat at the counter, eyes locked on Amara. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice low. "I was wrong to hide the truth. I was afraid that you wouldn't see me as just a regular person if you knew who I was. But I never played games with you, Amara. Everything I said, every moment we shared, it was real." Amara crossed her arms, her eyes still wary. "So why are you here? To apologize? Or to make me feel guilty for pushing you away?" Ethan took a deep breath, summoning all his courage. "I'm here because I want you to know the whole truth. I just resigned from Caldwell Resorts. I don't want to live the life my father planned for me. I want to open a small hotel in Havenport, a place completely different from everything I've known. And," he paused, locking eyes with her, "I want you to be a part of it. You said you wanted to open a bakery. Your bakery would be perfect in that hotel." Amara's eyes widened in disbelief. She let out a laugh, but not out of joy, out of shock. "You're kidding, right? Do you think I'll drop everything to follow you to some town I've never heard of, just because you say so?" Ethan shook his head, his voice pleading. "I'm not asking you to drop everything. Please consider it. I believe in your dream, Amara. and can build something meaningful together. Amara fell silent, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, but fear of being hurt again clung to her. She remembered all the times she had placed her hope in something college scholarships, friends' promises, only to be let down. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You could have anyone with your money and your connections. Why me?" Ethan offered a soft smile, his eyes sincere. "Because you're the only person who's ever made me want to be a better version of myself." His words stopped her cold. She turned away, pretending to wipe the counter to hide her emotions. But before she could reply, the cafe door swung open and a man stepped inside. Robert Caldwell, wearing an expensive suit and radiating authority. His presence silenced the entire cafe. Amara recognized him instantly from the news broadcast. Robert looked at Ethan, then at Amara, his eyes sharp. "You must be Amara Jenkins," he said, voice low. Amara nodded, unease rising inside her. "Dad," Ethan warned, standing up, but Robert ignored him and spoke directly to Amara. "I don't know what my son has told you, but you should understand this. He's just going through a phase. Ethan will return to his world, our world. Don't fool yourself into thinking you can change that." Amara felt heat rush to her face, not from fear, but anger. She stepped out from behind the counter, looking Robert straight. "I don't need your money or your world, but if Ethan says he wants to change, I believe him. You should too." Ethan looked at Amara, his eyes full of admiration. Robert sneered but said nothing. He turned to Ethan. "You have 1 week to reconsider, Ethan. Please don't disappoint me." And with that, he left, leaving behind a heavy silence. Amara turned to Ethan, her voice low. "Are you serious about this?" Ethan nodded. "It's more serious than I've ever been." Amara took a deep breath, her heart torn between fear and hope. "I need time," she said. Ethan smiled, relieved. "I'll wait." Winter in Havenport. A coastal town 3 hours' drive from Chicago, carried the salty scent of the ocean and a crisp, bracing breeze. The cobblestone streets lined with white-painted wooden shops and warm lights glowing from cozy diners created a peaceful scene, far removed from the hustle of city life. Amara Jenkins stood before an empty plot of land near the beach, where an old house once stood. Now only a moss-covered foundation remained. Beside her was Ethan Caldwell, dressed in a gray sweater and jeans, holding the blueprint for the Sweet Haven Hotel and her bakery. After a week of soul-searching, Amara agreed to join Ethan, bringing with her the dream of a bakery and a suitcase full of hope. She inhaled deeply, taking in the unfamiliar air. Leaving Chicago hadn't been easy. She had to quit her job at Bean & Brew, pause her final semester at school, and say goodbye to her mother, Grace. But when Ethan shared his vision for Sweet Haven, a small welcoming hotel where guests felt truly at home with a bakery inspired by her flavors, Amara saw a real chance to make her dream a reality. "Can we do this?" she asked, her eyes scanning the bare lot. Ethan smiled, his blue eyes full of conviction. "Not just do it, we will do it better than we imagined." He pointed to the blueprint, a 2-story building with large windows, a red-tiled roof, and a dedicated space for the bakery, featuring an oak counter and rustic wooden tables. Amara nodded, her heart racing at the vision. She began working with the interior design team, selecting warm beige wall paint and furnishings that matched her simple yet elegant style. Ethan, managing a project independently for the first time, learned to read construction contracts, negotiate with contractors, and handle all the details he used to overlook at Caldwell Resorts. Their early days in Havenport were full of energy. Amara and Ethan worked from sunrise, ate lunch at a seafood shack near the harbor, and planned into the late hours. They rented a small apartment in town. Amara took the bedroom, while Ethan slept on the couch. Though awkward at first, the shared space brought them closer. Amara discovered Ethan liked to drink coffee while reading, and Ethan noticed she hummed old Aretha Franklin tunes while cooking. Those small moments deepened their connection. But dreams rarely come without shadows. 2 months later, they received a financial report from the contractor stating that construction costs exceeded the budget due to foundational reinforcements needed for the old site. The bank refused to increase the loan, and Ethan's savings already spent on the land weren't enough to cover the gap. They sat together in their temporary office, a small room with mismatched furniture both weighed down by worry. Amara suggested we cut a few things pointing to the design. Smaller windows, cheaper materials. Ethan shook his head. No, I want this place to be precisely what we dreamed of. I'll figure something out. Amara looked at him concerned. Ethan, if we fail, you'll lose everything. He took her hand, his voice calm but steady. I've already let go of things that don't matter. This matters. His words touched her deeply, but she remained uneasy. She knew he was risking so much for both of them, and she didn't want him to regret it. Meanwhile, the Havenport community began to take notice. Some, like Mrs. Clara, the seafood shop owner, supported Amara and Ethan, who were excited by the idea of a new hotel drawing in visitors. But others, like Mr. Harris, a local real estate investor, were skeptical. With his white mustache and gravelly voice, Harris invited Amara and Ethan to a cafe downtown for a chat. He offered to fund the project, but with a condition: Ethan had to be removed. Miss Jenkins, he said, eyes sharp, you have talent, but Caldwell lacks experience. He's a city boy. He doesn't understand this town. You don't want your project to fail because of him. Amara's face flushed with heat. She stood, her voice firm. Thank you, but Ethan is my partner. We're doing this together, or not at all. Ethan, seated beside her, looked at her with admiration and surprise. Mr. Harris shrugged, giving a cold smile. You'll regret this. As they left the cafe, Ethan gently took her hand. Thank you for believing in me. Amara smiled, though worry still lingered in her heart. Could they overcome these obstacles? Rumors began to spread in town that Sweet Haven was doomed to fail, that Ethan was just a rich guy playing around, that Amara was naive to trust him. She overheard whispers while shopping at the market. Though she tried to brush them off, they began to eat away at her confidence. One late night she called her mother. Her voice trembled. Mom, I'm scared I made a mistake coming here. Grace's voice on the other end was calm. Sweetheart, every dream has a cost, but you're not doing this alone. Trust in Ethan, and trust in yourself. Her mother's words helped Amara regain her courage, but she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Ethan, meanwhile, was working relentlessly to find a financial solution. He contacted an old friend, a small-time investor, for support, and began drafting a detailed business plan to convince the bank. One night, Amara found him still working under the soft glow of a desk lamp. She brought him a cup of hot tea. You need to rest, she said gently. Ethan looked up and smiled wearily. I'll rest when we open Sweet Haven. Amara sat beside him, her gaze tender. We'll make it right. Ethan took her hand, his voice steady. Together we will. Winter in Havenport cast a thin veil of fog over the town, softening the glow of the lights along its narrow streets. The Sweet Haven project was steadily taking shape. The wooden frame of the 2-story structure had gone up, and Amara Jenkins stood inside the future space of her bakery, gazing at the newly painted beige walls. The scent of fresh lumber and the rhythmic clatter of hammers from the construction crew filled the air with promise. Bundled in a thick coat and scarf, Amara smiled as she imagined the oak counter where she would someday display butter cookies and lemon bars. But beneath her growing excitement lingered unease about rising costs, the whispering doubts in town, and Ethan Caldwell, who was becoming more important to her than she dared admit. In a deep blue sweater, Ethan stood at the edge of the site, reviewing the timeline with the contractor. He had changed since leaving Chicago. Less polished, more grounded, with the grit of someone building something from the ground up. Amara saw that, and though she held back slightly, she couldn't deny that Ethan made her feel seen and valued. Evenings spent sharing takeout at their temporary apartment, talking through design ideas, or just laughing at silly things, had begun to warm her guarded heart. But that peace didn't last. One afternoon, while Amara was reviewing furniture samples for the bakery, an old car pulled up in front of the site. A tall black man stepped out with close-cropped hair and a confident smile. Amara froze. She recognized him instantly. Marcus Tate, her ex-boyfriend. Marcus had once been a part of her world in Chicago, when she was still a wide-eyed dreamer who believed in sweet promises. He had laughed at her dream of opening a bakery and told her she should be satisfied with what she had. Seeing him here felt like her past, reaching out to pull her back. Amara Marcus called his deep voice familiar. Long time no see. She folded her arms, her gaze cold. What are you doing here, Marcus? He grinned and stepped closer. I heard the girl from Englewood is making big moves out here. Hotel bakery. Not bad. Amara's frown deepened, anxiety rising. I don't need your approval. What do you want? Marcus shrugged his eyes, scanning the site. I just came to talk. And to warn you. That Caldwell guy, he's not cut out for this place. Do you think he'll stick around when it all falls apart? His words hit Amara with a deep, quiet fear. She remembered how often Marcus had made her feel small, how she used to doubt herself because of his dismissiveness. She took a breath, voice steady. You don't know anything about Ethan, and you have no right to talk about me. Marcus chuckled. Still naive, huh? Don't let him hurt you, Amara, like I did. He turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, heart pounding. Just finishing with the contractor, Ethan noticed something was wrong with her face. He walked over, concern in his voice. Amara, what happened? Who was that? She hesitated. She didn't want to reopen old wounds, but Ethan's sincere eyes made it impossible to lie. Marcus, he's my ex. He used to mock my dreams. Now he shows up telling me you will leave me too, just like he did. Ethan took her hand, his voice firm. Amara, I'm not Marcus. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. He paused, then continued, more vulnerable now. My family tried to make me marry women who were suitable, the kind who only cared about the Caldwell name. I walked away from all that, because I want someone who sees me, and that's you. His words moved her, but Marcus's seeds of doubt still lingered. She pulled her hand away slightly, her voice trembling. I want to believe you, Ethan, but I need time. That night, Amara called her mother from their apartment. She told Grace about Marcus, his words, and the fears she couldn't shake. Grace listened, then spoke gently. Sweetheart, the past only holds power if you permit it. If Ethan makes you feel like he's different, provide both of you a chance. Her mother's words calmed her, but Amara knew she had to face Marcus to close that chapter of her life. The next morning, Amara arranged to meet Marcus at a small cafe in Havenport. Under a pale morning sun, she sat across from him, gaze steady. Marcus, I don't need your advice, she said clearly. I've chosen my path, and Ethan is part of it. You don't get to make me doubt myself anymore. Marcus looked at her, surprise flashing in his eyes. Then he nodded. You're stronger than I thought, Amara. Good luck. He left, and for the first time, Amara felt free, like she'd finally lifted a weight off her chest. Back at the site, Ethan was inspecting the latest construction progress. When he saw her, he smiled, though his eyes still held concern. Amara walked up to him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I talked to Marcus," she said. "He doesn't matter anymore." "But you, Ethan, you do." Ethan took her hand, his eyes lighting up. "You mean more to me than anything, Amara." They stood together on the dusty construction site, feeling a connection deeper than ever before. Spring arrived in Havenport carrying warm winds and a fresh green hue along the quaint cobblestone streets. At the Sweet Haven construction site, the project had begun to take shape, a 2-story frame, topped with red tile roofing, large windows being fitted, and the future bakery space gleaming with a polished oak counter. Inside, Amara Jenkins gently ran her fingers along the counter's smooth surface, imagining the scent of butter cookies wafting through the room. Outside, Ethan Caldwell's sleeves rolled up, reviewed the progress with the construction crew, his expression set with determination. But behind the excitement, a looming concern threatened the dream they had built together. That morning, Amara and Ethan received an email from the contractor. Attached was a financial report that left them stunned. The previous week's storm had damaged the roof and several support walls, sending construction costs soaring beyond their original budget. The bank loan, already hard-fought, wasn't enough to cover the overruns, and Ethan's savings, drained from the land purchase, couldn't stretch any further. They sat in their makeshift office, a small room with mismatched furniture, the air heavy with silence. Amara flipped through the report, her brows furrowed. "We need at least $50,000, she said quietly. "If we don't get it, construction halts." Sitting across from her, Ethan rubbed his temples, trying to stay calm. "I could sell some assets in Chicago stocks, maybe my old car. That might buy us a few more months." Amara looked at him, worry in her eyes. "Ethan, you've already risked too much. If this fails, you'll have nothing left. Maybe we need to find another investor." Ethan frowned, his voice firm. "No, I don't want outsiders involved. Sweet Haven is ours, Amara. I'll find another way." Amara stood up, anxiety rising. "And what way is that? We've called every bank. None of them are budging. You can't keep throwing money in without a clear plan." Her voice rose, fear and frustration mingling. It was their first time truly fought, and the tension shook both. Ethan clenched his fists, his gaze wounded but unwavering. "Do you think I don't have a plan? I'm doing all this for us, for this dream?" Amara crossed her arms, holding his eyes. "For us, or to prove something to your father, Ethan. I don't want to lose everything because you're too stubborn to let go." Her words landed like a blade. Ethan fell silent, at a loss. Amara turned and walked out, leaving him with spreadsheets and a rising sense of helplessness. She wandered down the beach near the site, waves brushing the shore, softly easing her anger. She wasn't angry at Ethan. She was afraid. Afraid her lifelong dream of owning a bakery would vanish. Afraid Ethan, with all his passion, was risking too much for her. She sat on a large rock, gazing at the sea, and dialed her mother. "Mom," she said, her voice shaky, "we're in trouble, and I was too harsh on Ethan." Grace, from her apartment in Chicago, listened intently. "Amara, you and Ethan are a team," she said gently. "And every team has disagreements. Instead of tearing each other down, they find a solution together. You're stronger than you think. And so is he." Her mother's voice soothed her like a sea breeze. Amara realized she wasn't just afraid of failing, she was scared of losing Ethan. Not just as a partner, but as someone she was beginning to love genuinely. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the office staring at the financial report without seeing it. Amara's words echoed in his head that he was trying to prove something to his father. He thought of Robert Caldwell and all the times the man had told him he'd never succeed without the family name. Was she right? He stood and stepped out onto the construction site. The skeleton of Sweet Haven rose before him like a quiet challenge. This wasn't just a project. It was proof that he could live on his terms. He said that he could build something meaningful with Amara. That night, Amara returned to the apartment. Ethan was at the kitchen counter quietly making tea. He looked up as she entered, his eyes soft and cautious. "Amara, I'm sorry," he said. "I've been stubborn. I didn't listen. I didn't want you to feel alone in this." Amara sighed and sat across from him. "I'm sorry too. I'm scared, Ethan. Frightened we'll lose everything. But I don't want us to fight." She paused, then added, "My mom said we're a team, so let's start acting like one." Ethan nodded, his expression lifting. "Agreed. Let's rewrite the business plan more detailed this time. We'll pitch it to the bank again. And if they still say no, we'll find an investor. But only if they don't take control." Amara smiled, relief spreading through her. "Sounds fair. But this time, I'm doing the numbers." "You suck at math," she teased, and both of them laughed. In that simple moment, something softened between them. Tension gave way to trust. The next day, Grace surprised them by arriving in Havenport with a tin of homemade butter cookies. Amara hugged her mother, tightly touched by the unexpected show of support. Grace toured the construction site, her eyes gleaming with pride. "I'm proud of you," she told Amara, squeezing her hand. When she met Ethan, Grace smiled knowingly. "You're taking good care of my daughter, aren't you?" Ethan nodded, his voice sincere. "I'm doing my best, ma'am." She gave a gentle nod. Her look said she believed him. Amara and Ethan dove into the new business plan, spending hours calculating costs, forecasting revenue, and preparing their pitch. The pressure remained heavy, but this time they faced it together. Amara realized that no matter how uncertain the road ahead was, she didn't feel alone anymore. Ethan, his determination, his presence, was now an essential part of her dream. Summer arrived in Havenport in full bloom. Golden sunlight bathed the beach, waves gently lapped the shore, and seagulls circled against the blue sky. Sweet Haven. The hotel and bakery that Amara Jenkins and Ethan Caldwell had poured their hearts into for 6 months, stood tall like a newly polished gem in town. The 2-story building with a red-tiled roof and expansive glass windows was adorned with a wooden sign carved with Sweet Haven, decorated with fresh flowers that radiated warmth and welcome. Inside, the air was thick with butter cookies, lemon tarts, and freshly brewed coffee. Polished oak counters gleamed behind delicately arranged pastries and coffee cup display. Amara, wearing a crisp white apron and her curly hair tied high, stood behind the counter, her eyes sparkling with nervous anticipation. Today was the opening day. She checked every tray of pastries one last time, whispering to herself, "We did it," though her heart still beat rapidly. Ethan walked in from the hotel wing in a light blue shirt and slacks, smiling when he saw her. "Ready, partner?" he teased. Amara gave him a mock glare, but her lips curved into a grin. "I'm more ready than you." The grand opening began at noon. A red ribbon stretched across the entrance, and a crowd of curious Havenport locals had gathered to witness the launch of their town's newest project. Mrs. Clara, the seafood shop owner, stood at the front, clapping enthusiastically as Ethan and Amara cut the ribbon together. "Welcome to Sweet Haven," Ethan declared, his voice ringing out over the cheers. The bakery doors opened, and the first guests stepped in marveling at the cozy space and the delicious smells drifting through the air. Amara worked the counter non-stop serving pastries and coffee, her smile unwavering, despite the sweat forming on her brow. A little girl with braided hair pointed at a tray of lemon tarts. "Are these any good?" she asked. Amara knelt, offering her a small piece. "Try it and tell me what you think." The girl took a bite, her eyes lighting up. "They're amazing! I want the whole one!" Her mother laughed and placed an order. Praise poured in from all directions. "These butter cookies taste just like my mother's. This coffee's better than anything I've had in Chicago." Each compliment made Amara's dream feel more and more real. Meanwhile, Ethan moved through the hotel greeting guests and checking that everything was running smoothly. The guest rooms, but elegantly furnished, were already earning rave reviews from early visitors. He stopped by the bakery and watched Amara work, his heart full. She's the soul of this place, he thought. But the joy was briefly interrupted when a sharply dressed middle-aged man in a gray suit stepped into the bakery. His gaze was discerning, and while Amara didn't recognize him, Ethan did immediately. James Larson, a well-known food critic whose words could make or break a venue with a single review. Unaware of who he was, Amara served him a coffee and a slice of chocolate cake with a friendly smile. "Hope you enjoy it," she said warmly. Larson gave a curt nod, didn't respond, and began scribbling notes. Amara felt a twinge of unease, but quickly turned to help other customers. Ethan leaned over and whispered, "That's James Larson. If he likes this place, Sweet Haven could be on the travel map." Amara's eyes widened. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? What if he hates it?" Ethan gently took her hand. "You poured your heart into this. He'll taste that." The opening day ended under the golden hues of a Havenport sunset. Amara and Ethan sat on a bench outside the bakery, exhausted but glowing with joy. "We did it," Amara murmured, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder. He smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "I never had any doubt." The buzz of Ethan's phone suddenly disrupted their peace. He checked the screen and his expression changed. "It's my father," he said quietly. Ethan stepped away to take the call. Robert Caldwell's cold voice cut through the line. "I heard about your little hotel. Don't fool yourself, Ethan. It'll fail. You'll come crawling back to Caldwell Resorts. I won't let this family be embarrassed." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened, his voice steady. "This is my life, Dad. I'm not coming back." Robert chuckled darkly. "We'll see." The line went dead, leaving Ethan with a gnawing unease. Amara walked over, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay?" Ethan nodded, but she knew he was hiding something. "Ethan, we're a team, remember? Talk to me." He sighed and told her about the call. Amara took his hand, her gaze unwavering. "Your father doesn't get to control us. Sweet Haven is ours and it's working." Ethan smiled, relief softening his features. He said, "You always know how to steady me," pulling her into a quiet embrace. James Larson's review was published in a prestigious travel magazine a few days later. "Sweet Haven is a hidden gem," he wrote. "Rustic, heartfelt pastries and rich coffee blend perfectly in a cozy, welcoming space. The hotel is a tranquil retreat for those seeking warmth and character." The article spread rapidly, catapulting Sweet Haven onto the radar of curious travelers. Amara and Ethan read it aloud together, whooping and laughing like children. But even in their joy, a new worry lingered. The attention also meant Robert Caldwell was watching, and he wasn't known for giving up easily. Summer in Havenport still shimmered, sunlight dancing on the ocean waves, rolling rhythmically ashore, and warm breezes carrying the scent of salt and wildflowers. Sweet Haven. The hotel and bakery, built by Ethan Caldwell and Amara Jenkins, had become a beloved gem among locals and tourists. Every morning lines formed for Amara's butter cookies and fresh coffee. The project had not only stabilized 3 months since opening, but flourished. But while the town buzzed with sweet success, Ethan was quietly preparing for a bigger step that would shape not just the future of Sweet Haven, but his entire life. Amara stood behind the bakery counter in her crisp white apron serving customers with her signature smile. She had just completed a large chocolate cake order for a wedding, and a sense of accomplishment lit up her face. Ethan, always dressed casually, in a pale blue shirt, would drop by, often sometimes, with coffee to tease her. "What did you do to the lemon tart today? It's even better than usual," he'd say, his eyes twinkling. Amara would roll her eyes, but inside, her heart glowed. She no longer doubted Ethan. He had proven he was here for the project, and her. Still, pressure lingered in the background. James Larson's glowing review had thrust Sweet Haven onto the tourist map, but it had also caught the attention of Robert Caldwell, Ethan's powerful father. One morning, while Amara was inspecting ingredients in the kitchen, Ethan received a letter hand-delivered by his father's secretary. "Ethan, you're destroying yourself," the letter read. "Return to Caldwell Resorts, or I'll cut all financial support, including your loan. Don't disgrace this family." Ethan tore the letter in half and tossed it into the trash, but the words clung to him like smoke. He didn't tell Amara. He didn't want to worry her. Instead, his resolve grew stronger. He would build a future with her, no matter the cost. He had been planning this for weeks. Ethan wanted to propose to Amara to declare his love and show her she was at the center of his world. He chose a weekend evening when the sun would set low and golden over Havenport. With help from Mrs. Clara, the seafood shop owner, he secretly built a small beach gazebo near Sweet Haven strung with paper lanterns and white flowers. A small table sat inside, lit with candles, and on it, a plate of butter cookies, the first thing Amara had ever baked for him. That night, Ethan told Amara he wanted to take her to dinner to unwind after a hectic week. Amara, wearing a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes, was suspicious when Ethan led her toward the beach instead of a restaurant. "Ethan, what are you up to?" she asked playfully. He smiled gently, taking her hand. "Just trust me, Miss Jenkins." When they arrived at the gazebo, Amara's eyes widened, breath-catching at the sight of the glowing setup under the sunset sky. "Ethan, when did you do all this?" she whispered, heart pounding. They sat and shared a light dinner of seafood and white wine, talking about Sweet Haven and laughing over memories of Chicago. Amara laughed when Ethan confessed he had broken a coffee machine while trying to brew espresso. But as the moon began rising over the water, Ethan stood up, his gaze serious but tender. He knelt on one knee in the soft sand, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. Amara froze her hands, covering her mouth in disbelief. "Amara, Ethan," began, his voice trembling slightly. "Since you paid my bus fare, my life has never been the same. I thought I had everything: money, success. But I didn't know what real happiness was until I met you. You've taught me that love means trust, building together, and finding joy in the simplest things. I can't promise you the whole world, but I promise to spend my life trying to make you happy." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver ring with a small diamond, elegant, understated, and sincere. "Amara Jenkins, will you marry me?" Tears welled in Amara's eyes, spilling down her cheeks. She thought of their journey, meeting on a bus, overcoming doubt and hardship, building Sweet Haven hand in hand. She looked into Ethan's eyes and saw only honesty and love. Nothing forced, nothing fake. "Yes," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Yes, I will marry you." Ethan smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger, then rose to embrace her. They kissed under the moonlight, and the ocean's waves gave a gentle soundtrack to their moment. From a distance, Mrs. Clara and a few townsfolk cheered and clapped, making Amara laugh through her tears. "Did you invite the whole town?" she teased. Ethan shrugged, eyes gleaming. "I want the whole world to know I love you." They returned to the gazebo, holding each other, feeling more connected. But Ethan knew his father's letter was still a threat. Robert Caldwell would not give up easily. And now Ethan had more than a dream to protect. He had Amara. The next morning, Amara called her mother Grace to tell her the news. Her mother laughed joyfully on the other end. "I knew he was special from the first time I met him. Are you happy, sweetheart?" Amara looked at the ring in her hand. Heart full. "I've never been happier, Mom." But deep down, she also knew this proposal was the beginning of a new chapter filled with challenges. Yes, but also hope, love, and a future she finally dared to believe in. Autumn in Havenport cloaked the town in a golden glow. Leaves floated gently through narrow streets, and the salty scent of the ocean lingered in the crisp air. Sweet Haven, the hotel and bakery created by Ethan Caldwell and Amara Jenkins, had become the community's beating heart. Locals gathered for sweet pastries and warm conversation in this place under soft lantern light. 3 months after their romantic beachside proposal, Amara and Ethan were preparing for their big day, a wedding that would not only celebrate love, but also symbolize their journey through class divides, racial barriers, and familial expectations. On a late October afternoon, the beach near Sweet Haven was transformed into a simple yet breathtaking wedding venue. A sandy aisle framed with wildflowers in white and green led to a wooden arch wrapped in vines and paper lanterns. Wooden chairs lined both sides, and waves gently crashing became nature's background music. Amara stood in a hotel room upstairs before the mirror, dressed in a simple silk wedding gown that hugged her figure and complemented her warm brown skin. Her mother Grace pinned a pearl clip into her loose curls. "You look like a poem," Grace whispered, eyes shimmering. Amara turned, embracing her mother tightly. "Thank you for always being here." Outside, Ethan stood beneath the arch, his light gray suit sharp but his hands slightly trembling. He looked toward the ocean, replaying every step of their journey from the bus ride that changed his life through the trials and triumphs they had faced together. In the front row sat Mrs. Clara, the seafood shop owner, and several former colleagues from Caldwell Resorts, people who had supported his decision to walk away from the corporate empire. But then Ethan's breath caught. Standing at the edge of the aisle was Robert Caldwell, his father dressed in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. Ethan braced himself, heart pounding, but Robert nodded and sat quietly in the back. No words, no confrontation, just presence. As soft violin music filled the air, Amara stepped onto the aisle, bouquet in hand, eyes locked with Ethan's. She strolled on the white sand, her radiant smile drawing quiet tears from many watching. When she reached him, Ethan took her hand and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Amara smiled, her eyes bright. The local pastor officiant began the ceremony, but to Ethan and Amara, the world seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them at that moment. During the vow exchange, Ethan spoke first, his voice shaking with emotion. "Amara, I knew my life would never be the same from the day you paid my bus fare. You showed me that happiness isn't found in wealth or status, but in honesty, love, and building dreams together. I promise to love, protect, and walk beside you through every season of life." Tears streamed down Amara's cheeks, but she smiled, gripping his hand tightly. Then it was her turn. "Ethan," she began, taking a deep breath, "you've made me believe that dreams can be real. You're not just my partner. You're the person who makes me want to be better every day. I promise to stand by you, share your joys, carry your burdens, and build a meaningful life. She paused, wiped a tear, then added with a laugh, "And I promise always to make you butter cookies." Laughter rippled through the guests. Ethan kissed her hand, his eyes glowing. The pastor smiled. "By my power, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Ethan pulled Amara into a kiss as the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Grace dabbed her eyes. Clara let out a playful whistle. Friends and family rose to celebrate the union. The reception unfolded at Sweet Haven with outdoor tables filled with seafood, Amara's signature pastries, and music from a local band. Amara and Ethan shared their first dance under paper lanterns, their eyes never leaving each other. Then Robert Caldwell stood up and raised a glass. The crowd fell silent, unsure of what was coming. "Ethan," he began, his voice steady, "I once believed you were making a mistake, but today, seeing you and Amara, I realize I was wrong. Sweet Haven isn't a failure. It's a monument to your courage. I'm proud of you." He turned to Amara. "And you, Amara, you're a remarkable woman. Welcome to the family." Amara's eyes widened in shock. Ethan squeezed her hand, overwhelmed with gratitude. Applause rang out again, this time louder, a moment of reconciliation that Ethan had never thought possible. Later in the evening, a wealthy investor from Chicago, Mr. Thompson, approached them. "You've created something special," he said. "I want to buy Sweet Haven. Name your price." Amara and Ethan looked at each other, then both smiled and replied in unison. "It's not for sale," Amara added gently. "This isn't just a hotel. It's our home." Mr. Thompson nodded with respect and stepped away. That night, Amara and Ethan sat barefoot on the beach, the moonlight casting a silver glow across the waves. Their hands intertwined, their hearts full. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Amara whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. Ethan kissed her forehead. "And this is just the beginning." They began dreaming aloud, perhaps a new Chicago bakery or a small community scholarship fund. Whatever the future held, one thing was sure: they would face it together, with love, with faith, and with the warmth of Sweet Haven forever in their hearts.